Okay, so let's dive into this. We've got this really fascinating piece you sent over from CBS News about the Army base names situation.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant development they're reporting on concerning these, historical military sites.
It really lays out what was announced, the details.
Exactly. And it's not straightforward, is it? We're not talking about just like simple name changes.
No, not at all. It seems quite complex. There was the original naming, then a renaming process, and now, well, a reversal, but with a twist.
It's a very specific twist.
Right. So our mission here for this deep dive is basically to cut through all those layers, understand exactly what the CBS article says is happening, why the source suggests it matters.
And what it tells us about how we handle history, public symbols, that whole conversation. But yeah, sticking strictly to what's in this article you provided.
Exactly. Just the facts as reported by CBS News.
So for you listening, wanting to get a quick, clear handle on this, we'll walk you through the key points from the article.
Make sure you feel, up to speed based on the source.
Okay, so the core announcement, according to the article, is President Trump's plan to restore the names of several more Army bases, names that originally honored Confederate figures.
Right. And that immediately signals that this is unwinding something, isn't it? A process finished under President Biden, mandated by Congress.
Yes, but like you said, there's that crucial twist the article really focuses on. It's not just flipping back to the old Confederate namesakes.
No, it's more nuanced. Explain that bit from the article.
Well, the article states pretty clearly that while the bases go back to a version of their original names, the controversial ones, they won't formally be named after the Confederates.
Ah, okay. So who are they being named after then?
They'll officially recognize other service members, people who happen to share similar names, non-Confederate figures.
The namesake change. That's the core of the strategy, it seems. The article actually quotes Trump from a speech, right? At Fort Bragg?
It does. He said something like, "We won a lot of battles out of those forts. It's no time to change." And I'm superstitious.
Which is interesting because that speech was at a base already renamed by his administration earlier this year, back to Bragg from Liberty, but, crucially, with a non-Confederate Bragg as the namesake.
Exactly. That earlier move with Fort Bragg and also Fort Benning, which became Fort Moore, then back to Fort Benning honoring a different Benning, that whole thing kind of set the stage.
It established the playbook, basically.
Yeah, the article makes it clear this specific method, this namesake swap, it's not brand new. They've used this approach before for those two bases.
Okay, so let's walk through the list the article provides, these 7 other bases that are now part of this announcement. What does the source say about Fort Gordon in Georgia?
So, Fort Gordon. The article says it was originally named for Confederate John Brown Gordon. Then in 2023, it became Fort Eisenhower, after President Eisenhower.
Okay.
Now, under this new plan, described in the source, it's set to honor Master Sergeant Gary C. Gordon. He was a Medal of Honor recipient, served in Somalia.
So, back to Gordon, but a completely different Gordon, a modern hero. Got it. What about Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia?
A.P. Hill was originally for Ambrose Powell Hill, another Confederate. He got renamed in 2023 to Fort Walker. That was for Dr. Mary Walker.
Right.
Now, the article says the new plan is to honor 3 different Civil War Medal of Honor recipients: Lieutenant Colonel Edward Hill, First Sergeant Robert A. Penn, and Private Bruce Anderson.
3 people. So it reverts to Fort Hill, but recognizing Lieutenant Colonel Edward Hill and 2 others, not Ambrose Powell Hill.
Correct. Keeping the Hill name, but honoring different heroes, including one with that same last name.
Interesting way to handle it. Okay, next on the list from CBS News is Fort Hood in Texas.
Fort Hood, originally John Bell Hood, renamed Fort Cavazos in 2023 after General Richard Cavazos.
And the new plan?
According to the article, the new direction is to honor Colonel Robert B. Hood, who was a World War I hero.
So again, sticking with Fort Hood, but a different Hood. A WWI connection this time. What about Fort Lee in Virginia?
That one, famously, was named for Robert E. Lee. It became Fort Gregg Adams in 2023, honoring Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams, 2 individuals.
Okay, and now?
Now, the article says it's going to honor Private Fitz Lee. He was commended for heroism in the Spanish-American War.
Another Lee, different conflict, different person. Yeah, that pattern the article describes is really consistent, isn't it?
It is. Let's look at Fort Pickett, also in Virginia.
Okay, Pickett.
Originally George Edward Pickett. Renamed in 2023 to Fort Barfoot, after Tech Sergeant Van T. Barfoot.
And the reversal.
The new plan, per the article, is to honor First Lieutenant Vernon W. Pickett. He was decorated for extraordinary heroism in World War II.
Back to Pickett, WWII hero this time. Same last name. Okay, how about Fort Polk in Louisiana.
Fort Polk was originally named after Leonidas Polk. That one became Fort Johnson in 2023 for Sergeant William Henry Johnson.
So now it's going back to.
Back to Polk, but honoring General James H. Polk, according to the source. He was a WWII officer who later commanded U.S. Army Europe.
So a different General Polk.
Okay.
And the last one on the list from the article, Fort Rucker in Alabama.
Right. Originally, Edmund Winchester Rucker, renamed Fort Novosel in 2023 after Chief Warrant Officer Michael Novosel Sr.
And the plan now?
The plan now, based on the article, is to honor Captain Edward W. Rucker, who was a World War I aviator.
Rucker to Rucker, WWI aviator. So yeah, just like the article outlined, every single case follows that pattern. Revert to the original, often Confederate-linked last name, but officially dedicate it to a different military member with that name, not the original Confederate figure.
That's exactly the consistent approach detailed in the article based on what they got from an Army spokesperson.
And the article mentions who's tasked with this.
Yeah, it adds that the Secretary of the Army, Daniel Driscoll, has been directed to, quote, take immediate action to get these 7 bases renamed following this specific approach.
Immediate action. Okay. And just to put this in the broader context the source provides, this whole move directly undoes the work of the Naming Commission, right?
Exactly. And the article points out the commission was actually created by Congress right at the end of the first Trump term.
Oh, right. After lawmakers overrode his veto on the defense bill that included it. That's an interesting detail.
It is. And then the commission did most of its actual work, the recommendations and reviews, during the Biden administration. These renamings were part of that larger push, especially after 2020, to reconsider Confederate symbols.
So this isn't just out of the blue.
No, the article paints it as the latest step in this sort of back-and-forth process spanning multiple years, multiple administrations. You had legislative mandates, commission work, the actual renamings done, and now this reversal, but with that very specific namesake twist.
Okay. I think that really clarifies what the CBS News article reported on this announcement.
Yeah, the core action described is pretty clear. Reversing the recent renamings, bringing back versions of the original names, but crucially assigning totally new non-Confederate namesakes.
And you can see the layers involved just based on the source. You had the original Confederate names, then the whole naming commission process mandated by Congress, implemented under Biden, and now this new directive under Trump focusing on the Secretary of the Army.
It really brings you back to that fundamental question, doesn't it? Why do these names matter so much? Why all this focus on the name of a military base? And, what is this particular approach? Keeping the name but changing the person honored. What does that make you think about?
Yeah, it's clearly not just about the letters on the sign. It's about the history, the symbolism, who we choose to elevate and recognize officially at these really important places.
And that intricate dance the article describes, juggling namesakes and history. It leaves you with a kind of provocative thought, maybe.
What's that?
Well, what is this specific method, keeping a name tied to a difficult past, but trying to give it a new meaning through different honoree? What does that tell us about how we, as a society, grappled with the tough parts of our history, and how we decide who gets the honor of being remembered in these very public spaces?
That's definitely something to chew on. A lot to consider there. Well, thank you for sending over that source material. It certainly gave us a lot to unpack in this deep dive.